Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 731 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today, we have another edition of the Bold Beginnings series, a series that began back on episode 702 with honeymooning. And then it went to 706, Adult Diagnosis, 711, Terminology Part 1, 712, Terminology Part 2, Episode 715, Bold Beginnings, Fear of Insulin, Episode 719, The 15-15 Rule, Episode 723, Long-Acting Insulin, Episode 727, Target Range. And on today's episode, Jenny Smith and I will discuss food choices. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you're a U.S. resident who has type 1 diabetes or is the caregiver of someone with type 1, please consider going to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Join the registry, take the survey. When you complete the survey, which will take fewer than 10 minutes, you'll be helping people with type 1. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Omnipod, makers of the Omnipod DASH and the Omnipod 5. You may be eligible for a free 30-day trial of the Omnipod DASH, and here's how you can find out. Omnipod.com/juicebox. The podcast is also sponsored today by Dexcom and the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. Head over to dexcom.com/juicebox to find out if you're eligible for a free 10-day trial of the Dexcom G6. When you use my links, you're supporting the show. Hi, Jenny, and welcome back to the Bold Beginnings. I can't pretend that we didn't just record another episode. I'm sorry. Never mind.
Hi, Scott. It's very lovely to see you again.
Jenny and I just finished one, and we're moving into food choices. So there's a ton of feedback here from people. Really enough that I'm not certain we're going to get through it, but we'll give it a shot. And I'm going to start the conversation based on a conversation that I had just recently with a young person in their 20s with type 1 diabetes. And just we were talking about all kinds of stuff. And in the middle of it, she said, having diabetes really messes up food for you. She's like, you start looking at it like, what is that going to do? And, is this, or, maybe I won't eat that because of what it's going to do, or it doesn't feel worth it to me to fight with this for 3 hours. She said she never thought about food like that prior to diabetes. And
right.
It's a fair statement. So let's dive right in because there's a ton here. This person says that grocery shopping seemed incredibly difficult at the beginning. And it was also emotional. She said they were trying to eliminate some of the kind of quote unquote not good for you foods that my daughter was getting. But then she saw me crying as we went down the aisles. Wow. So that sounds like really in the beginning, because you're feeling, I'm going to guess, not a therapist, Jenny, but that's a sense of loss, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And there's a sense of loss, I think, in many things, but because food is a major part of diabetes management. It is, because food is also a basic necessity of life. We have to eat. We can't just say, well, that affects this, so I'm just going to not do that anymore, right? But we have to eat food. So what you've been used to doing may need to change. Yeah. Now, one step into that was what you were doing not the greatest, or was it not as healthy anyway? And could you start to see some of these changes once you mentally get over all of the hard stuff that it takes to navigate through all these thoughts? Can you start to see this as as a family, we could clean this up. We could be doing this versus that, right, and it would be better for all of us, right? But it's hard.
Yeah, and not everyone's going to take that path either.
No.
And I will tell you that some people see it as a challenge too. Like, oh, just because we have diabetes now doesn't mean you can't change me. I'm going to figure this out. Right.
Right.
It's funny because I'm somewhere mixed into that idea. I'll probably figure it out as we're talking. This first and biggest worry I had was limitations of food. What in the world was I going to feed my kid, because she only really ate a few things to begin with.
Yeah.
And those things all had carbs.
And that's where then you work with that, because so much has changed with the child's life to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a starting place for being like, well, you're just going to eat broccoli today because that's so much better for you than whatever it was the child. No. That's not appropriate.
Right.
But it's then learning, well, the 10 things that your kid does eat, figure those out.
Yeah.
And eventually move on.
The same person said that they then had an appointment with a dietitian a number of days later, where the dietitian lifted the fear by just saying, hey, listen, you can eat what you want, but you have to cover it with insulin. But then they didn't give them the rest of the information, which is, what this whole thing's about, right? Like 10 carbs this and 10 carbs that might not hit the same.
Right.
So they went from, oh my God, there's nothing my kid can eat, to, oh, it doesn't matter, they can eat anything, to then realizing we don't seem to be very good at bolusing for those things.
Right.
And then they ran into that idea of like, well, this must be what it is. Now, this next person says, I was confused about the different views between low carb and like a regular diet. And I didn't realize that you could use insulin skillfully and still have a great A1C. And we do that now, but there still are times that we might not want a bunch of insulin on board. So we eat appropriately around that.
Correct.
So that's a really thoughtful, that's somebody who's been through it already and figured it out,
or has kept enough, even in a shorter period of time, has kept enough notes, or has done some trend analysis, or looked enough at what is going in and has seen, well, when we do this works out pretty well. We've got it figured out, whether it, is an apple or fruit snacks.
Yeah.
They figured it out. Right. But then comes in, the other types of things, and they say, well, these are the variables. I think it would be easier if we just have less overall insulin. Maybe we could go this route for this type of setting, and it works better for us. Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. It's probably adding a good amount of variety anyway, which is healthy in your nutrition intake overall to begin with.
This next person's point, I agree with completely. So, they talked about, I'd never thought about glycemic index in foods before this, obviously. She said the podcast helped her think about it. But that she did make some pretty, what she thought were obvious decisions on some things. And she puts a little list here, but I'll tell you for certain, little things like if you have pancake syrup in the house, get a sugar-free one. Like just like, why, what are you punishing yourself for? Right. First of all, I don't know if you've ever really thought about it, but you start squirting that syrup on everything. By the time you're done, you have a half a cup of it in there. You're basically drinking 40 carbs of sugar, out of nowhere.
Oh, so much more. So much more than that. Yes. But yes.
So if you're going to have okay, fair enough. I still want to have pancakes. Have pancakes. Use the sugar-free syrup. It makes it easier on you. Do you have to? No. I mean, there are people who listen to this podcast who think this podcast is about the idea that you can eat whatever you want. I mean, I think the podcast is about understanding how insulin works, but fair enough. So, but yeah, that kind of thing. Or here's a super easy one. No one's ever going to tell you. Make sure you're buying bread that has no high fructose corn syrup in it. Super easy decision to make. Makes things much, much simpler.
Yeah. And if you go a step further, get sprouted grain bread. So much easier glycemically than even the typical white breads that might say they're organic with no added corn syrup or whatever. But the more unprocessed something is, the better you're going to find your glycemic kind of, outcome.
If you're a person who absolutely has to have soda, and I have to admit, I don't understand that. I don't ever drink soda really, but Arden and I went out to lunch the other day and we're like, can we have 2 unsweetened iced teas? And she goes, we're out of unsweetened iced tea. And I was like, supply chain issues. And,
Yes.
we were both like, we'll have a Diet Coke. And at a meal where I probably would have drank a couple of iced teas, I did not get through the Diet Coke. It's not for me. But if you have to have soda, God bless, drink diet soda. And then you don't have to worry about that thing. There are simple places where just for health in general, forget if you don't have diabetes, you could be cutting out sugar. And at the same time, it just makes this whole thing easier, especially in the beginning. There's still times when people send me graphs and I'm like, look, do yourself a favor. Eat a simpler diet for a couple of days while you're figuring this out. Like, you don't know what you're doing. And on top of that, you're trying to bolus for Lucky Charms.
Right. Yes.
That's a ninja level decision you're trying to make here. You just started yesterday,
Right.
That kind of an idea. You okay with that? I'm not saying to restrict your diet. I'm saying, okay, let's head together to omnipod.com/juicebox. The first thing we'll do is brace ourselves because there's a photo of me there and it's not pleasant. It's the best picture I could take. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, I apologize. Omnipod. They're makers of the Omnipod 5. It's the first tubeless automated insulin delivery system. It's an algorithm-based system. It's probably what you've been waiting for. Omnipod 5 is the first and only tubeless automated insulin delivery system to integrate with the Dexcom G6. It is now available for people with type 1 diabetes ages 6 years and older. Featuring Smart Adjust technology, the pod adjusts insulin delivery based on your customized target glucose, helping to protect against high and lows day and night. Where do you find out about this? Omnipod.com/juicebox. Now, if you're not in the market for an algorithm-based system, you might want to take a look at the Omnipod DASH, and you may be eligible for a test drive, a free 30-day trial of the Omnipod DASH. You can also learn this at omnipod.com/juicebox. Just scroll down to the big purple box and start reading. After that, you fill in the tiniest bit of information and you're on your way. So whether you're looking for the Omnipod 5 or the Omnipod DASH, you want to go to my link, omnipod.com/juicebox. There, everything is well explained and easy to understand. A tubeless insulin pump is within your grasp. Head over there now. When you're done, I'd keep going right to dexcom.com/juicebox. Now, here's the good news about this. Dexcom.com/juicebox. Here's what you're going to get there, or moreover, not get, a photo of me. So it's a nice, relaxing, and calm experience. No pictures of Scott. Instead, what you're going to get is the breakdown about the Dexcom G6. You're going to learn about 0 finger sticks, glucose readings that are right on your smart device, customizable alerts and alarms, and how to get started right now with the Dexcom G6. You can make better diabetes treatment and diabetes management decisions with 0 finger sticks and no calibrations. The Dexcom G6 lets you see your glucose numbers with just a quick glance at your smart device and receiver. Get alerted when your glucose levels are headed high or low, and share your data with up to 10 followers. And the Dexcom G6 is covered by most insurance plans. There's details surrounding all of what I've just said, but those details are at dexcom.com/juicebox. You don't want to, listen. You don't have to listen to me, right? You can do whatever you want. My daughter's been wearing an Omnipod since she was 4 and she's 18. She's been wearing a Dexcom since, she was 6 or 7 and she's 18. These items are at the core of our decision-making process, moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day with type 1 diabetes. And you know what? They can probably help you a lot with type 2 diabetes as well. Dexcom.com/juicebox. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes, links at juiceboxpodcast.com. I am contractually obligated to say that for full safety and risk information about the Omnipod, plus free trial terms and conditions, you can visit omnipod.com/juicebox. I'm going to get you back to Jenny now, who, by the way, works at integrateddiabetes.com, in case you're interested in working with her. like, I'm not saying to restrict your diet. I'm saying
make potentially wiser decisions and or see what you're doing. Are you constantly having problems no matter what you're trying? Maybe you're at the level of getting the majority of stuff, but there are a few things where, like the maple syrup or the regular sodas, or you can't get over drinking juice.
Yeah.
Okay, we know juice is recommended for a low blood sugar treatment. Don't drink juice. There's no reason to just drink juice. Eat the fruit, don't drink the juice.
Jenny, I grew up in a house where nobody understood nutrition, and orange juice was seen as healthy.
As healthy, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
It's
and you have a
it's
giant
better than
glass of
soda from I guess nutrient quality, especially if you're getting the not from concentrate, whatever. Okay.
Jennifer, that is not a good marketing line. It's better than soda. That does not breed. But in all of your foods, I mean, I'm telling you right now, no high fructose corn syrup. If you just cut that out of the things you're buying, huge deal. If you can, I listen, it's time consuming, but try to stay away from things in bags or boxes. These things have preservatives in them that make them more difficult to bolus for. I made my own potato chips last weekend, which took hours, but I found relaxing. People made fun of me, but that's okay. And you should see how much less impact that had on Arden's blood sugar versus any kind of a potato chip that would come out of a bag. And you would
because you know what you did to them.
It was a russet potato with salt on it. That's what it was. Like there's nothing else in it. I mean, except for whatever they sprayed on those potatoes before we bought them.
You didn't buy organic potatoes, Scott.
I don't know if I did or not. I was just making the point for the situation.
I'm teasing. Well, who knows, organic versus non-organic? Yeah. Who knows what floats through the air? And
I'm sure there's a way to get around that distinction already here.
Yes.
A lot of statements here about my first food shopping was completely overwhelming. We weren't carb counting, and we had to work in 15 grams of carb portions. This poor person was not carb counting. So they were eating either 15, 30, 45, 60. That's a lot of.
And that would be more of like a sliding scale kind of concept of this many carbs, take this much insulin,
and that's all.
And then use this correction if your blood sugar's in this range.
And then the end of her statement I've seen online a million times and heard from people in general, which was that was way too much food for my kid. My kid wasn't eating 30 carbs at a sitting. They were little, but they wanted more than 15. And now they're force feeding. They're telling the kid, you got to finish this because we bolused for it, which is not a good start to your life with diabetes. That's for sure.
Not at all. No. I mean, and that's really old school. I mean, that's really what I learned. Mm-hmm. And that was really old school education. I mean, I could remember when I was so excited when I was taught to read a food label and I could cover carbs with insulin better. I was so excited about that because it just, I don't know, it widened up things. I still wasn't the grocery shopper. I mean, it was still my mom, but I don't know, it just made a difference. So.
This person said that they ran home from the hospital, threw out everything with sugar in it, based on no information at all from anyone, just thought that was the right thing to do. And then it took them months to realize that this stuff still had carbs in it, and it probably didn't matter one way or the other. People said, I wish someone would have told me the best carbs to carry with me.
That's a good, yeah.
Yeah, because I do you ever see, like, here's one that floors me, right? Chocolate's not a good treatment to stop a low with, right? No,
not at all. It's full of fat.
Yeah, but people do that all the time, right? Like, so you want simple sugar that's absorbed easily through your body. Think about, like, if you ever had that emergency gel, they tell you to rub it in the cheeks, inside of your cheeks. So juice works really well. A lot of people.
Another really good one are the honey sticks.
Okay.
Especially if you're someone who really doesn't want to do all of the processed color-filled candies and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The long, skinny honey sticks work really well. I've seen a lot of people comment about, and I've done it myself when I've had like lack of something in a purse, is just the sugar packets at a restaurant.
Yeah.
They work awesome. Dump it under your tongue. It dissolves right away and it is quick. It works.
I remember having to do that with Arden one time, and she was like, ew, no. And I said, well, Just pour it on your tongue. And I was like, and melt it in your spit, hold it in your mouth for a little while before you swallow
Swish it around.
Yeah. Just, get it, make sure you get it on all your teeth so we can end up at the dentist. But that's also a good example. If you're giving people sugar overnight, you might start seeing
dental caries,
dental problems. And I've had a dentist on, actually his episode will be out pretty soon. So by the time this is out, it'll probably have been out, where he said, look, I'm not telling you to jump up in the middle of the night and brush your teeth. He's like, but have water by the bedside. And when you're done, just swish it around your mouth and clear your mouth out. It would be a big deal to do that.
Yep.
Okay. So best carbs to carry around, simple sugars that work quickly.
I wanted to say simple sugar too. If people are looking at labels, the simplest, like most easily digested carbohydrate is glucose, right? Which is why we have glucose tablets, but glucose is dextrose. So on candy labels, if you're looking for a candy, look for glucose or dextrose within the first 3 ingredients, and then you've got something that's going to work really quick.
Okay. And then after that, I think find what works for you too.
Right.
And let me say this, just don't think that because you opened the package, you have to eat them all. If you have a little single serving, like, I don't know, gummy package, and there's 10 pieces in there, 5 of them might fix your low blood sugar. Don't feel weird about throwing the other 5 away or twisting it up for later or something like that. You don't have to eat them all because you opened it up, which is a thing that people fall into all the time. All right, now's the time. Let's see. Hold on a second. This person actually made your point earlier that this might be a good time to make a sweeping change in how you eat. If you looked up and saw that your diet's not a healthy one, it's a good it's a good excuse to do something about it. So that was yours.
And as you said earlier too, the least processed or the less processing of a food most often means the food is clean, if you will, right? There's not a lot that's been added to it, whether it's corn syrup or all of the additives that they keep to preserve it on the store shelves. I mean, the best places to shop in the grocery store, it's around the perimeter. You've got your fresh produce, lots and lots of non-starchy, great vegetables, healthy fruits. You've got your protein sources. It's the aisles that are the danger zone.
Yeah. I know. I've seen it before. The grocery store is actually set up just the way Jenny said. Like, look at it one day. They concentrate kind of the crappy food in the
internally.
Middle. Yeah. That's interesting.
They do.
So here's one. What were the free snacks? I wish someone would have given me a list of free snacks. And that's a funny statement to me because it's not always free, right? Like, I understand the concept, like a cheese stick might be considered, or a Slim Jim or something like that. If your blood sugar's, I don't know, 120, and having a cheese stick, doesn't have carbs in it, okay, I get your point. Maybe you don't need insulin for it right away. But if you really listen to the podcast, and if you've lived with diabetes for a while, you start realizing that, the fat and the cheese could slow down your digestion, which could push up your blood sugar. Or you could eat meat that later would be broken down and stored as glucose. There's nothing that's like legitimately free, I don't think.
Iceberg lettuce. There you go.
Okay, Jenny found
I mean, unless you literally eat the entire head of iceberg lettuce, and I'm not saying that doesn't have carbs in it. It does. But I mean, iceberg lettuce and many of the greens will have very limited, if any, impact blood sugar wise, right? I mean, on a whole big dinner size, plate size spinach salad, I might add to what I'm kind of swag calculating on that, maybe 5 extra grams for all of the greens that are there, really. The rest of the stuff that you add on top of that is what needs counting. All of those other non-starchy, bell peppers and onions and mushrooms and cucumbers, they have carbs in them. The concept of free, again, is kind of an old concept. It kind of is like that 15, 30, 45 grams per meal, and you take this amount of insulin. I got to know free foods as a newly diagnosed as my aunt and uncle would bring to family gatherings big vegetable trays because Jenny could eat those foods for free.
Yeah.
And man, did I eat them. I'm quite sure if I had a CGM, my mom would have been like, man, we got a dose for those cucumbers, right?
Arden goes on kicks where she eats tons of carrots. And we bolus for the carrots. Like,
oh yeah.
You know.
Carrots are one of the carbier, non-starchy type of vegetables, definitely.
The point is that in the beginning, you might not know what you're doing. You might have your basal too high, and so you don't notice things like this. But as you start to get your settings right, understand diabetes more, you're going to start seeing the impacts of those so-called free foods. Now, don't get me wrong. If you've got a 4-year-old and they want to snack 6 times a day, I take your point, and you should definitely find those ideas. A little piece of, I don't know, cheese is definitely going to be less of a hassle for you blood sugar wise than giving them an orange slice.
And for a 4-year-old, from a standpoint of portion, that cheese stick or the Slim Jim or a piece of, grilled chicken or a boiled egg or whatever it may be, it's probably going to have pretty little to no impact whatsoever in the portion that child is eating versus the adult who's like, well, I'm just going to eat a big old 6-ounce chicken breast because there aren't any carbs in it. Right. Well, that's not going to work out so well.
And that makes me think too, if you do have a toddler or a kid who's running around all the time, there may be an amount of carbs they can take in throughout the day that will look free because they were going to get low, and you're just kind of counterbalancing it before you see it.
You're kind of bolstering with little snips in between. And that's often the way that toddlers eat too, right? A little bit here, a little bit there. They may eat 2 strawberries. They might eat, a bite of cheese. That's just what they do.
Right. So if you're in a situation where you think, oh my God, my kid eats throughout the day and they never eat insulin, try thinking about it like this instead. It's not a free food. You're pre-carbing a low before the low happens. Right. You're treating before it happens and you don't even realize it. It could be the situation. I wish somebody would have given me a list of foods. That's interesting because then that's, we get into eating styles, and I don't know that doctors would want to be pushing an eating style on you one way or the other. But you should definitely see a dietitian who could help you with that.
And I would request a dietitian who specifically is a diabetes educator, if possible. If where you live, that is a possibility. I will say that being a dietitian myself, I know diabetes for many reasons, obviously, but had I gone into the realm of cancer management as a dietitian, even my life with diabetes would have taught me something, but I may not be quite so good at education outside of that because that wasn't my realm of professional work. Yeah. I've learned a lot by working with so many people with so many different needs and interests and requests and whatnot to kind of draw on. So definitely do your homework, as we've said before, with any clinical team. Do your homework and find somebody that can work with you.
This person said, there are just days when I need a break, and so I eat very low carb. And I think that's completely reasonable, first of all. And there should be options so that people know how to do that without being scared. Because if your settings are set up for a lifestyle and then you suddenly swap that lifestyle to something else, your settings are going to be too heavy then, and you're going to have trouble. But she's like, it would have been nice if someone would have explained to me that, hey, if you just don't want to eat a bunch of carbs today, switch to this basal program and do this. And I take her point. I think that's a really good point, actually.
And or cover your meals, learn what that means in terms of meal coverage, because it really should be a swap out of, okay, my basal does this because I've tested it. That should work pretty well. I mean, I've got a lot of people I work with who, for religious reasons, do all day fasts, right? And so we even find with that, having tested basal, that sometimes on a fasting day, they may even need a 10% reduction in their base basal because there really is no food impact whatsoever through the course of the whole entire day. Okay. But the meal times themselves, if you're doing a type of fasting that's more vegetables and protein, or just a little bit through the course of the day, or if you're doing any intermittent fasting where you're really only eating for 6 hours of the day or 8 hours of the day, you may see different impacts than you do with all day food intake of more, mixed meal.
Yeah. Do you have time, or do you have to go?
No, let me check my schedule. I have 5 minutes.
All right. So we'll do one more and then we'll kind of come back to this one. This person says, I wish someone would have told me that it's okay, right, to eat one way, to eat another way. But instead, I got a very restrictive care team that shamed us. And it was really tough. That's I'll tell you that of all the things, like, I'm really freewheeling on my Facebook page, meaning like I let people talk like adults, I have very few rules, but shaming people about their food choices, I am not okay with ever.
No.
Especially around diabetes, you can cause eating disorders with very easily. Eating disorders with people with type 1 is more common. If someone wants to eat Kentucky Fried Chicken every day and learn how to bolus for it, that's their life. You let them do that. If someone never wants to take in a carb and wants their blood sugar to be 80 24 hours a day, that's their decision.
That is their decision.
Yeah. And then everybody tries to make their point. And the one thing I wanted to ask you before we go on this one is, you're a trained dietitian, right? So you have type 1 diabetes. Do growing children need carbs to grow correctly?
That's
Go
a
ahead,
good
Jenny.
question.
I'm not saying a freaking word. You talk.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the bigger piece to it that I always look to analyze when I get the questions from parents is calorically what's necessary. Mm-hmm. And within that then also becomes food preferences and what they currently look like and what you're considering transitioning into for your child. Let's say you think that it would be easier to just be carb free or to be low carb, let's say. Mm-hmm. Most people who are not entirely carb free. Children do need a very set amount of nutrition intake through the day, carbs, proteins, and fats. Proteins and fats are really the very essential. They are. Protein is the building block of your body. You need fat for a lot of different functions, hormone and all that kind of stuff in the body. And carbs are the preferred energy source of the body. They are. They're fast. They get in. They give you this energy boost. And then they kind of digest and they come out. And that's sort of the reason that we eat every several hours if we are eating more normal carb types of meals. So are carbs necessary? Carbs are necessary, I think, in a certain amount. What that amount is boils down to, what are you looking at doing? And how can we meet the overall nutrition need of your child where they are? Are they heavily into sports? Are they more sedentary? What is their growth percentile? Are they growing on par with where they started out prior to diagnosis? Do we need to make any adjustments? And then we can look at, you want to aim to try lower carb because it might be a little bit easier in terms of glycemic control. Okay, but then we need to navigate those other pieces to make sure that they're meeting their growth needs.
Okay. The fat and protein stuff.
Right.
It's funny. You're making me think of Arden's friend who is she's like, I'm a vegetarian, but then she basically just eats like potato chips and stuff like that.
Right. Yes, that's not.
I think you're missing the point.
You might be a vegetarian, but
I think what you just said just resonated with me so much. It made me feel like if everyone had you with them, I don't even mean diabetes, or a person like you to stand behind you and go, okay, look, here's your lifestyle, here's your need. If we eat these things in the course of a day, that's going to put your body in the best position possible.
Right.
All right. And then the problem is that people then get caught up in, well, you need carbs to grow. Like, okay. You're like, maybe you do and maybe you don't. Let's just say you want to have carbs in your diet. And then there's a person over here who's eating like a pretty keto diet and they don't want that.
Right.
Just live and let live. Like, just let it
Right.
be. You know what I mean?
And their parameters, most often the people that I've seen who are keto or more paleo or more just considering low carb, they've done enough homework, or they've come in with, I'm trying to do this. This is what I really want to stick with. I'm missing something. Something isn't quite right. I don't feel quite right or whatever. So then we have some things to look at to make sure we're meeting glycemic goals, as well as for kids, especially, again, growth goals. I mean, protein it's a big piece of growth and change, and kids are growing rapidly. Okay. They need a good quality, nutrition intake.
Right.
I think the bigger thing, if you're looking at carbs, are you looking at going low carb and getting an answer to whether carbs are necessary? Carbs like celery and cucumbers and kale and spinach and berries, if you're going to add carbs in small amounts, those are the ones you want. Right. You don't want the processed, like keto carby foods that are just like tricking the body.
The only time eliminating carbs from someone's diet makes me sad is when I see them do it because they can't figure out insulin.
Correct.
That's all. Like, if you want to do it as a choice, I understand. And if you figure out insulin and then decide, I still want to be low carb, I understand. But I feel badly when someone just didn't, all the things we've talked about in this podcast forever, didn't learn how to bolus, didn't learn how to pre-bolus, didn't understand glycemic load, all that stuff. You don't understand any of it. And you're just stuck in a space where you're like, when I eat carbs, my blood sugar goes way up. I eventually give myself insulin. I get super low and I'm bouncing all over the place. And damn it, I'm not eating carbs anymore because I don't want to be unwell. That to me, I don't know. I wish they knew. If they knew and they decided to do it, I understand. But if they don't know and they just are being pushed into it because they're scared, well, I would,
correct.
I would hope that somehow they could learn before they made that decision.
No, I 100% agree there. Okay. 100%.
All right. So Jenny, the next time we do this, we'll come back and make sure we're done with this list before we move to the next one. You can go do your thing. I hope
sounds good.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Jennifer Smith for helping me again on the podcast today and remind you that she works at integrateddiabetes.com. I also want to thank Omnipod and Dexcom for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Go check out all the trials and offers at omnipod.com/juicebox and dexcom.com/juicebox. Those links, of course, are available in the show notes of your podcast player and at juiceboxpodcast.com. I hope you're enjoying the Bold Beginnings series. There's way more coming, so keep downloading them every Friday. If you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a couple of things you can do that will help me. You can leave a great rating and review wherever you listen. You can follow or subscribe in the podcast player or audio app that you listen in. You can tell a friend about the show. If you see a question online where people are like, I don't understand this, you could say, oh, you should try episode blah, blah, blah of the Juicebox Podcast. That would be lovely as well. What else? Listen, subscribe, tell a friend. Here's another one. You could join the Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes, now with over 27,000 members. Over 110 new posts a day. What am I trying to say? It's jumping over there. Full of great information and great community members. Go meet somebody just like you. I'm going to share a little something here at the end. I assume you're a real big fan if you're still listening once you know the podcast is over. But we're at the halfway point of 2022. The podcast is now as popular by download or stream. You understand you can download an episode or stream it while you're listening. A download or a stream count the same for me. And in 2022, the show has as many downloads or streams already at the halfway point of the year as it did in the entire year of 2021. Now, not only is that true and amazing, and I thank you very much, but the best day in 2021, like the day with the most downloads. It was the day of the year. I was like, I cannot believe this many people downloaded the show today. That kind of thing, right? That amount, the best amount from 2021 is now about, I'm not great with percentages. Give me a second. Hold on a second. I'll be right back. I'm back. I used the calculator. Okay. Sorry. So that show, that one show that had the most downloads in 2021, it has about 21% fewer downloads than an average day in 2022 does. That is bananas. As a matter of fact, what I would consider a slow day on the podcast is now only 14% lower than what the best day of 2021 was. That is crazy growth. It is because of you. It's because you're sharing, you're listening, you're subscribing. I can't thank you enough. It's really astonishing. And really, you could knock me over with a feather when I see stuff like this. Absolutely wonderful. I really appreciate you supporting the show. I hope you're enjoying the Bold Beginnings series. Don't forget, there's a ton of other series within the podcast. If you go to that private Facebook group, scroll to the top, click on the featured tab. There's lists of all of them. I'm not going to bother you here with all of them, but there's so many about how people eat and the pro tip series, the defining diabetes stuff about thyroid and pregnancy, mental health, on and on and on. Go check it out. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.